Hello, Year 11, and welcome to our next video here on functions and their graphs. We're looking at the quadratic formula and the graph today. We've looked at some things a bit like this before. We have been looking at quadratics by factorising and finding the zeros of the equation that way. We have also completed the square, and that's particularly good for finding the coordinates of the vertex. Now, the quadratic formula we have bumped up against before, right? We know that the quadratic formula is, right, x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. If we come back to the start of this topic, we talked about domain and range, and there are some things about the domain that we have to keep an eye on. What are those things? Well, we cannot divide by 0, that's a bit of an issue, but also the more pertinent, salient point here is that we cannot take the square root of a negative number. Right. Now, our quadratic formula has a negative, doesn't have a negative, might have a negative. Our quadratic formula has a square root. So that means the part under the square root can't be negative, or else I can't produce an answer. Okay, and so that part under the square root, which looks like b squared minus 4ac, right, that part there, we call that the discriminant, and we use an uppercase Greek delta, looks like a triangle. We use a delta as shorthand for discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. And this will tell us sort of quickly if our quadratic has either 2, 1, or no roots, zeros, I should say. All right, what do I mean by that? Well, if that part under the square root, if the discriminant is a positive number, right, then I take the square root, that's fine, and I get plus or minus some number, right, I get 2 distinct roots. So if the discriminant is greater than 0, my quadratic has 2 distinct zeros. If my discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, equals 0, okay, if my discriminant equals 0, I can take the square root of 0, but what's going to happen is my quadratic formula is going to give me only 1 0. Only 1. And what that means is we have a perfect square, and that the x-axis is a tangent at the vertex of the graph, right, of our parabola. It would just touch it with the perfect square. Finally, if my discriminant is less than 0, if my discriminant is a negative number, then my graph never intersects the x-axis. My function has no zeros. Okay, here's our discriminant here. So, if, as a reminder, if my discriminant, this is what we mean by discriminant, if that's greater than 0, then we have 2 zeros, right, not 2 roots. Let's stick with word roots. If it's equal to 0, right, then I have a perfect square, and that means that the x-axis is a tangent to our graph. And if the discriminant is less than 0, then my function has no zeros. Here's an example here to show you how we might apply that. Use the discriminant, show this has no zeros. Our discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So b equals 4, b squared minus 4 times a times c. 4 squared minus 24 is negative 8. And since our discriminant is less than 0, then our equation has no zeros. That's it for using the quadratic formula, and particularly the discriminant, to help with our graphing. If you've got any questions, you know what to do. Jot them down, ask me in class, or as the case may be soon, email them to me, I suppose. Okay, see you soon. Bye.